another vector. Let me jump directly to this slide. So we mentioned about value of money, right? The value of money. What is the value of money? Previously, when we talk about value of money, we talk about, in fact, it's earning power of the value. Earning power. So we have certain amount of money we put in as investment, and over time, right, we put the money in that investment. But if the money wasn't put in the investment, this money has its own earning power in the market, maybe interest. So just consider its earning power. We cannot say that the money, the same amount of money this year and 3 years from now are of the same value. So it's of the same amount. That amount at the present time, just by accruing the interest after 3 years, we'll get more in terms of number. So that's earning power. It has earning power. That is how we view time value of money. Time value of money. However, there's another power of value of money, purchasing power. If we later we'll example everything that we all the product that we see, or most of the product we see, the price gets higher and higher mostly. So with the same amount of money, right, nominal value that you see, after 10 years, you will not be able to buy the same amount of products. I think that is purchasing power. Your purchasing power gets smaller. If your purchasing power gets smaller due to the rise of the price, that rise of the price is inflation. Okay, this is, I mean, globally, in fact, people use the price of Big Mac from McDonald's to consider, for example, basically purchasing power or consumer price index in different places. So for example, in 1990, with $100 you can buy 50 Big Mac. In year 2001, which is 11 years after, with $100 you can get 40 Big Mac. Originally you can get 50, now you can get 40. Of course, if we compute it, but computed, we know that in year 1990, each Big Mac cost $2. In 2001, it cost $2.5. This is the inflation. Each unit is increased by 25%. That's inflation. The price rises by 25%. Inversely, if you think of the value of money, the purchasing power of money, originally you can buy 50. $100 you can buy 50. Now you can only buy 40. So your purchasing power is reduced by 20%. Different way of looking at the same thing. Your inflation grew by 25%. Your purchasing power from 50 to 40 is reduced by 20%. Okay? From 50 to 40.
a different way of addressing the effect of inflation. You look at inflation, you look at the price, you know the price rise. But you look at purchasing power, it is reduced by a certain percent because you are comparing against the original purchasing power. But there are also deflation of the product. I think in terms of gasoline, well, I think chances are it may continue to deflate. No, I think around 1970 there was oil crisis. The price rise tremendously. When I was a graduate student in the U.S., when I arrived there, the gasoline price I still remember is the cheapest one is 90-some cents per gallon. And there was 1 year that I went to the U.S. and rented a car and tried to fill up the tank. Every gallon was close to $4. But it went up, then it came down. It went up because of the oil company, they sort of being coordinated to limit their production so that they can keep the price high. And some countries break out from this organization. They say, okay, we want to limit the production, but I want to make money. I will just increase the amount. But when the supply get more, price drop. And now demand get lower, so price drop. But it's still fluctuating all the time. But here you see the deflation. If you still look at, it's just comparison. It doesn't have a specific year. But 100 can purchase 63.69 gallon. It's a little bit more than $1. Then now you can purchase 80 gallon. Your buying power gets higher. But if you look at the price, you have deflation of 20.38%. That could also happen. So purchasing power can change. And a very common reference of the price hike or the change of purchasing power or inflation will be using so-called consumer price index. Okay. So consumer price index, traditionally they use 1967, and later they use a different reference point or base point. If you use the consumer price index in 1967 as the basis, the price in 2000, which is 33 years afterwards, it becomes 512. So there's an increase of 413%. Okay, so the price ratio is 5.129 of the price at 1967. It's basically a basket of product that they monitor their price and find the average price hike over every year. So every year you compare with 1967, and that gives you these are the increase, but basically you can see that it's 800% higher. Probably, I think maybe you will be to your surprise that in the U.S. annual public college tuition rise highest than any other thing. So originally it's $294 per year.
Now, in 2000 it's 3,960. And 20 years from this point, right now it's probably 40,000 US dollars versus 4,000. Right now, in public university is about 40,000. Here is increased by 12 times. From this point until 40,000, it's increased by 9, 10 times. So that much difference. Okay. So I'll give you a sense of how the prices change. Different products have different rate of change. As I said, that for oil price, it fluctuates a lot. But for most other products, it does inflate. But some of the products doesn't inflate that much. Some of the products inflate a lot. So other than consumer price index, it could be producer price index. That's for industrial use. Right? We don't understand the cost of their production. Consumer price index is basically, again, it's a measure of goods and services over time. Okay. And usually it's, you can see that food, housing, apparel, transportation, something very, very basic, typically purchased by urban consumers. So that we get a sense of how price hike over time. And there are also two terminologies that we will see later. One is average inflation rate, the other is general inflation rate. General is for CPI, Consumer Price Index. We have a inflation rate. Okay. 1 year over the other year. And average inflation rate is about a specific product over some period of time. It's average inflation rate. Of course, inflation rate for each year will be different. But when we say average inflation rate, we do not mean that taking the inflation rate, add them together and divide it by the number of years. We'll do the compounding effect, right? So from 1 year to next year, increase by 2%, increase by 3%, increase by 5%. We need to compound them together and take their it's exactly as we compute effective interest rate, annual interest rate based on these compounding factors. So the average is not arithmetic average, it is a geometric average. Okay. We'll see an example very quickly. So CPI, right? We use base period of 1967, the price of if we want to buy something because of let me address it differently. Buying a basket of products cost 100 in 1967. Buying the same basket of products will then cost 512.9 in 2001. And the ratio is represented by CPI, Consumer Price Index. Okay, so it's 500. When you see, 2001, the CPI is 512.9. We know that we are considering the price of the same basket of product in 2001 versus the price for the basket of product in 1967. So this CPI is used in 1967 as the base. However, you may use a different base, 1982 to 1984. Then the CPI will be different, right? Because you are comparing with different time. So CPI is just a reference, but you do need to remember
you need to remember which year it is comparing with to get the CPI. So it could be comparing with 1967. So you see all the big numbers. It's quite long ago, quite far away from these years. If you are comparing with 1982 to 1984, the average of them, then as you can see that it's a lot smaller. So depending on which years as the base period for you to compare with, you have different ratios, and they can play with it in different ways. And look at gasoline. Interesting enough, the price, all of the prices are lower than it was in 1967, right? Because it's not even 100. It's lower. And remember, all of these are comparing with the base period. Okay, it's not like this one is comparing with the previous year. It's not. All of them. If we talk about CPI, it's comparing with a base year. So similarly, gasoline price, we're comparing the gasoline price of 1991 versus 1982. So all of them are lower. And if you look at steel price, it's pretty much stay the same. Sometimes a little higher, but it's closer to 100 against the price in 1982. And passenger car did not rise too much. In fact, it rise quickly in 1991, and along the way it stayed pretty much stable. And 1 year even come down a little bit comparing with 1991. So just give you some feeling of how the inflation is, or how different inflations are for different products. So average inflation rate, as I said, if a certain year a basket of product costs 100, and over 2 years, buying the same basket of product costs 112.32. So the way to compute so-called average inflation rate will be compounding the average inflation rate twice. Right? So this original value compounded twice to get this inflated result. So here we know how to compute, so we can compute average inflation rate, which is 5.98%. Right? So compounded once, compounded twice by 1 plus 5.98%, you get 112.32. So that's very similar to how we compute the effective interest rate. So here give us a way to compute so-called average inflation rate. So for all of them, you can do that, right? The price changes, and you basically multiply the previous one by 1 plus F to 23, and you get, you solve for it, then you compute its average inflation rate. You see, these are the inflation rate for the different products, including tuition. Tuition rise about 8.19% every year. It's very high. Again, I want to emphasize that the percentage over time is very powerful. You look at the result, there is 8%. It's not that high. Over an extended period of time, here is 33 years. It's more than 10 times. You have a sense of the impact of certain number. Particularly, you are playing with the money. And for general inflation rate, you follow the same way, right?
you get the CPI on that year, again with its base and sort of compute is 1 over n power and minus 1. Similar to how we compute average inflation rate, except that here we use CPI to compute. So we can compute the general inflation rate. With two rates, sometimes we are, why do we want to have two rates? We usually deal with average inflation rate on specific product. But sometimes we want to have the feeling that everything becomes more expensive. How much more or how much less this product will inflate. So if it follow everything else, then okay. If it's a lot higher, you say, wow, how much higher it is. And get a sense of differentiation. So if we want to sort of remove the impact of general inflation, we can get something called differential inflation. Although I think in this textbook it doesn't discuss that, but differentiated inflation gives us a sense of additional inflation on specific product and additional impact financially. And this is again for different years. We'll in the end we get this amount of money. But this is how we pay. So we can use this amount divided by 104,000 in the beginning and compute its average inflation rate. So average inflation rate is 7.89. Right? This is very similar to earlier simple numbers. We can still do the same thing. And we come to, okay, let me finish this part, then we'll take off for today. Our buying power will get less and less because of inflation. So when we see certain number in a certain year, that number is so-called actual dollar, like nominal value there. However, it doesn't have the same purchasing power. If we want to recognize its purchasing power, we need to deflate that value to get so-called constant dollar to reflect the same purchasing power. Then we compute our present worth. If you want to think of the time value of money equally, because earlier we said that two power, one is earning power, we consider it by interest, right? Earning power. You get the money earlier, you can invest, right? 1 year earlier, you can invest an additional year, 2 years, so put it in the bank for 2 years, get additional. The other is purchasing power. The purchasing power gets less and less. If you want to have the true value of money, not only you need to adjust it based on its earning power, you also need to adjust it based on its purchasing power. So what you see, you call it real money. No, actual money. Actual money is the number you see, but it doesn't have the same purchasing power. So you want to discount it in some sense, taking out the inflation factor to get constant dollar, which we already said the same buying power. The money, the number that you see, possess the same buying power. Then you bring that to the present time, the present words. Then you are comparing the value of the money, the number that you see, not only adjusted by earning power, but also adjusted by purchasing power. Okay, so inflation. So later we'll do analysis on actual dollar, or do the analysis on
$100. Actual dollar, in fact, is still useful, just like when we compute tax. The IRS, the taxing office, they want to see your actual dollar for computation. So when you finish computing actual dollar, then you can convert it back to $100. Okay. Right? Just as we saw earlier for net income and net cash flow. For tax purpose, the government agency will see your actual dollar. They are not considering purchasing power. They are not considering the essence of the purchasing power or the time value of money. They are just considering what happened, a number that they can see that actually happened. Okay, so private industries, they will probably use actual dollar analysis first, then convert it to $100. And government agency, they just use $100. They don't pay tax. Okay. Okay, I'll see you next week, and I think